The recent clash between White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt and the hosts of The View has ignited a firestorm, drawing sharp commentary from cultural heavyweight Joe Rogan and exposing deep fault lines in American media. Leavitt, a young conservative woman with a razor-sharp intellect, stepped into the White House briefing room and immediately became a lightning rod for criticism from the daytime talk show's panel. Her unapologetic stance, refusal to bow to progressive talking points, and ability to handle hostile questions with precision have made her a standout figure in a politically charged landscape. Meanwhile, The View's hosts, particularly Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, responded with a barrage of mockery and accusations, revealing what many see as their disconnect from everyday Americans. Rogan, never one to shy away from a fight, jumped into the fray, delivering a blistering takedown of the show's theatrics and praising Leavitt's poise. This saga, unfolding in late 2024 and early 2025, underscores a broader cultural battle over truth, representation, and the role of media in shaping public discourse. Karoline Leavitt's ascent to the White House press secretary role under President Donald Trump's second administration marked a shift in tone from her predecessor, Karine Jean-Pierre. Where Jean-Pierre often appeared tethered to her briefing binder, stumbling through questions and leaning on vague platitudes, Leavitt brought a different energy. Confident, articulate, and unflinching, she fielded questions from a skeptical press corps with a clarity that caught many off guard. Her preparation was evident in every exchange, as she anticipated gotcha questions and turned them back on her interrogators. This skill, honed through years of working in conservative media and Trump's orbit, made her a formidable presence behind the podium. For supporters, she represented a new breed of communicator, someone who could match the media's aggression without losing her cool. The View, a daytime staple known for its outspoken liberal hosts, wasted no time targeting Leavitt. The panel, led by Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, took issue with her rejection of what they called wokeness, a term Leavitt used to signal her administration's departure from progressive cultural priorities. Goldberg, in particular, was incensed, arguing that Leavitt's dismissal of wokeness was a slap in the face to the social progress that enabled her to hold such a position. The host suggested, with a mix of sarcasm and indignation, that Leavitt owed her job to the very activism she criticized. Behar chimed in, insinuating that Leavitt's appointment was less about merit and more about fitting Trump's superficial standards of appearance. The panel's attacks weren't just personal, they were emblematic of a broader refusal to engage with Leavitt's ideas, opting instead for caricature and condescension. Leavitt's response was a masterclass in restraint and precision. Rather than stooping to the level of petty insults, she used her platform to highlight the hypocrisy of her critics. In an appearance on Sean Hannity's Fox News show, she calmly acknowledged the hostility she faced but framed it as a badge of honor. She emphasized her pride in representing Trump's agenda and touted the diverse, high-caliber team he was assembling, from Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to Susie Wiles, the first female White House chief of staff. Leavitt's refusal to engage in the emotional theatrics of her detractors only amplified her credibility. She didn't just weather the storm, she redirected its energy, exposing the shallowness of The View's critiques. Joe Rogan, whose podcast commands millions of listeners, couldn't resist weighing in. Known for his no-nonsense style and willingness to call out absurdity on both sides of the political spectrum, Rogan saw Leavitt's performance as a breath of fresh air. In a recent episode, he marveled at her preparation, describing her as a gangster who checkmated the media's attempts to trip her up. He contrasted her sharpness with the rabies-infested henhouse of The View, a phrase that captured the show's descent into performative outrage. Rogan didn't stop there. He tore into the hosts for their out-of-touch commentary, accusing them of peddling divisive narratives that alienate half the country. His takedown was both scathing and surgical, highlighting specific moments of absurdity, like Behar's bizarre claim that he believed in dragons, a remark so detached from reality it became fodder for his mockery. Rogan's broader point was about the state of public discourse. The View, in his view, epitomized everything wrong with legacy media, a group of insulated elites preaching to a shrinking choir while dismissing the concerns of millions. He argued that Leavitt's ability to stand firm in the face of their attacks resonated because it reflected a growing frustration with media gatekeepers. Americans, he suggested, were tired of being lectured by people who seemed oblivious to their struggles. Leavitt's poise and refusal to play by the media's rules made her a symbol of resistance to that condescension. Rogan's praise wasn't just about Leavitt, it was a call for more voices like hers, unafraid to challenge the status quo. The View's hosts, however, doubled down. Goldberg, in particular, leaned into her role as the panel's moral arbiter, framing Leavitt's rejection of wokeness as a betrayal of marginalized communities. She argued that the term, often weaponized by conservatives, was rooted in a legitimate fight for equality, a fight that Leavitt, as a young woman in power, should respect. The irony was palpable. Goldberg, a Hollywood veteran with decades of privilege, positioned herself as the voice of the oppressed while dismissing Leavitt's perspective as uninformed. Behar, meanwhile, tried to deflect Rogan's criticism by mocking his influence, suggesting his podcast was a fringe platform peddling misinformation. The attempt fell flat, as Rogan's audience dwarfs The View's viewership, and his cultural reach far exceeds their daytime slot. The clash wasn't just about personalities, it was a microcosm of a larger cultural divide. On one side stood Leavitt and her supporters, who saw her as a defender of common sense and individual merit. On the other were The View's hosts, who viewed her as a threat to the progressive ideals they championed. The debate over wokeness encapsulated this divide. For Leavitt, the term represented an overreach of ideological conformity, stifling free thought and prioritizing identity over substance. For Goldberg and Behar, it was a catch-all for social justice, a movement they believed was under attack by conservatives like Leavitt. The truth, as always, lay in the gray area, but neither side seemed interested in finding it. Bill Maher, a liberal comedian known for his critiques of progressive excess, offered a surprising perspective. While no fan of Trump, Maher has repeatedly called out The View for its descent into woke rot. He argued that the show's obsession with identity politics and moral grandstanding alienated moderate Democrats and handed ammunition to conservatives. Maher's critique echoed Rogan's, though from a different angle. He suggested that if Democrats wanted to regain ground after their 2024 electoral losses, they needed to abandon the performative outrage exemplified by The View and return to the principles of classical liberalism, reason, tolerance, and open debate. Leavitt, in Maher's view, wasn't the problem. She was a symptom of a media landscape that had lost its way. The public's reaction to the saga was telling. Social media platforms like X were flooded with clips of Leavitt's press briefings, often paired with captions praising her sharpness and resilience. Posts mocking The View's hosts went viral, with users highlighting their most outlandish statements. Rogan's podcast clips, particularly his rabies-infested henhouse jab, racked up millions of views, fueling a wave of memes and commentary. The sentiment was clear. A significant portion of Americans felt that Leavitt was speaking for them, while The View was speaking at them. This disconnect wasn't new, but Leavitt's emergence brought it into stark relief. For conservatives, Leavitt was a hero, a young woman who embodied their values and refused to be cowed by a hostile media. For progressives, she was a villain, a mouthpiece for Trump's divisive agenda. The truth, as usual, was more nuanced. Leavitt's rejection of wokeness wasn't a wholesale dismissal of social progress but a critique of its excesses. Her focus on merit and competence resonated with those who felt that identity politics had overshadowed substance. Yet her critics weren't entirely wrong to point out that her rhetoric, at times, risked alienating those who saw wokeness as a fight for fairness. The problem was that neither side was willing to engage with the other's perspective, preferring instead to dig in and lob insults. The View's attacks on Leavitt also revealed a deeper unease. Her youth, confidence, and conservative credentials challenged the narrative that women in power must align with progressive ideals. By dismissing her as unqualified or a token, the hosts inadvertently reinforced the stereotypes they claimed to oppose. Leavitt's success didn't fit their script, and rather than grapple with that, they resorted to mockery. It was a missed opportunity for real dialogue, but it was also a reflection of the show's evolution. Once a platform for diverse perspectives, The View had become an echo chamber, more interested in signaling virtue than fostering debate. Rogan's intervention was a turning point. His platform, unencumbered by corporate gatekeepers, allowed him to say what many felt but few could articulate. His defense of Leavitt wasn't just about her, it was about the need for authenticity in a media landscape dominated by posturing. By calling out The View's hypocrisy and praising Leavitt's clarity, he tapped into a growing demand for voices that cut through the noise. His critique resonated because it wasn't partisan, it was human. People were tired of being told what to think, and Leavitt's refusal to play along was a reminder that another way was possible. As the dust settles, the saga of Karoline Leavitt versus The View offers a snapshot of America in 2025. A nation divided, not just by politics, but by how we talk about it. Leavitt's rise signals a hunger for communicators who prioritize substance over spectacle, while The View's decline reflects the limits of outrage-driven media. Rogan's role as a cultural referee underscores the power of independent voices in shaping the narrative. Whether this moment leads to real change or just more noise remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: Karoline Leavitt isn't going anywhere, and neither is the fight for the soul of public discourse.